Welcome back to Yang Daily. I'll be your host, Alex Cheney, bringing you all the Yang news you need to live your life right. Well, this is the week for American justice to be put on trial. Strap in. Quick shout out to our Tier 3 patrons, Peter Park, Shay Meehan, and Nathan Stankowski, as well as all our other patrons. You keep us all informed and engaged. If any of you out there want to join these advocates of humanity first and independent journalism, head on over to patreon.com/YangDaily. It would only take a couple of bucks a month from each listener to keep this podcast and community going and growing into the future. Now on to the news. Trump's impeachment trial has begun, though the GOP is still trying to argue that it should not be allowed. It's hard to grasp just how insane their argument is. They're saying that he cannot be impeached because he is not currently president, even though he committed the crime as president and was impeached by the House during his presidency. Under the GOP's logic, no president would ever be held to account for anything they did in about the last month of their presidency because it takes at least that long to complete an impeachment trial. Thus, the GOP is arguing that presidents should be able to break the law with impunity in their last month in office. Does that sound like a good idea to anyone? Also, let's take a moment to acknowledge that many Republican senators declared that they would acquit Trump before the trial even began, and that in any other court, a potential juror would be thrown out for that, as well as for having personal ties to the defendant, and a dozen other reasons that apply to these senators. What we are about to see is not a just process. Exactly as they did before, the GOP has already determined Trump's innocence based on nothing but his party alignment. This is an incredibly low point in American politics, and not nearly as amusing as that lawyer who had to tell the judge that he's not a cat. Links below. Ultimately, these arguments are attempts to avoid the ugly truth of what these senators have supported and what the consequence was. It's much like wanting to overturn the election results due to states accepting mail-in votes past Election Day. It makes no difference if votes come in a couple days late or if a president is tried a couple weeks after his term. In either case, they are not objecting on merit. They are targeting a technicality as an excuse to dismiss something they don't want to deal with. Once again, the objections were ultimately rejected. The Senate voted 56 to 44 that the trial is constitutional, with 6 Republicans, Cassidy, Collins, Murkowski, Romney, Sass, and Toomey, voting to continue. Considering even that is well short of the 67 votes that would be needed to convict Trump, don't expect to find justice here. Meanwhile, Mike Lee has taken the position that Trump should be acquitted from inciting insurrection against democracy because, quote, everyone makes mistakes, everyone is entitled to a mulligan, end quote. Yes, he really said that. He was equating Democrats telling their constituents to get in Republican legislators' faces and confront them, the main difference being that those Democrats were urging confrontation over actual policy positions those Republican congresspeople held that were hurting those people, not urging them to trespass in the Capitol to stop those Republicans from trying to carry out the democratic process after the Democratic Party lost an election, and justified on conspiracy theories that those Democrats created. But, it sounds good to people who want to believe it. Also worth noting, Mike's live and let live attitude seems to be a very recent development. But hey, everybody should get one free shot at a coup, right? Georgia's Secretary of State's office opened a probe Monday into Trump's efforts to overturn the state's election, including his call where he asked Raffensperger to find votes. Legal experts say that Trump's calls may have violated at least 3 state criminal election laws: conspiracy to commit election fraud, criminal solicitation to commit election fraud, and intentional interference with performance of election duties. The felony and misdemeanor violations are punishable by fines or imprisonment. However, Trump's legal defense will no doubt be that he truly believed the election was rigged, and it will be hard for prosecutors to prove otherwise. Frankly, I think he does believe it. It's part of his psychosis, according to his niece Mary. This will be just one of dozens of criminal lawsuits that Trump is now facing. So, not much different to before his presidential term in that respect. The Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy noted something both happy and appalling, that the combined effect of the relief package's poverty relief measures will increase the income of the poorest 20% of Americans by over one-third. That's obviously a good thing, but it's appalling that 20% of Americans live on an average of $10,000 a year, and many of those have jobs. We can and we must do better than this. And on that note, UBI Works has set up a website around the CanSIA report, which investigated the sustainability and effects of a UBI in Canada. To be honest, it's quite cryptic as far as the sustainability, just repeating that it grows the economy by more than the cost. What the report really was looking at was the minimum level of taxing private incomes that could fund the UBI and have net zero federal deficit impact in 25 years while leaving all lower and middle income citizens with a net benefit. They found a little over half of the funding coming from income taxes and the rest from deficit spending paid off the accumulated deficit in 25 years via economic growth. The way I think about it is this: either you fund it completely with deficit funding and don't worry about paying it off because the deficit doesn't matter unless it causes inflation, or if you can't get people to acknowledge that they live in a world of fiat currency, you fund it with taxes. If you fund it with taxes, the simple breakdown goes like this. We know from trials that UBI grows the economy massively, enough to cover at least a quarter of the investment cost of the UBI. That alone makes it worth doing because you're taking some amount of money and giving back that plus 25%. If someone offers to exchange your dollar bill for a dollar bill and 25 cents, your concern is not the cost of the dollar, it's getting as many dollars into the deal as possible because this is free money. The growth is primarily due to the economy being limited by poor and middle class people having not enough disposable income to buy what the economy is capable of producing. Giving them more money reduces that blockage, growing the economy. It also increases entrepreneurship, innovation, efficient investments, and so on. If the initial funding for UBI came mostly from rich people, that's okay because they're the ones reaping most of the financial benefit of the economic growth, so they get a lot of their tax money back that way. And that's essentially taxing passive income. Then you have spending efficiencies. Unconditional cash is more efficient than conditional welfare because it does not require bureaucracy. Furthermore, it is more effective, which reduces spending on emergency services like hospitals, prisons, homeless shelters, etc., because it improves health, reduces crime, and gets people housed by preventing poverty instead of treating it. In other words, UBI saves some of the money we are already spending. Between economic growth and cost savings, UBI is an obviously good deal. It's an investment with positive returns. What this report tells us is that even if you take what I would deem the worst possible path for funding a UBI, income taxes, you would still only have to provide half the upfront cost through taxation on the upper class to have the federal contribution pay for itself in 25 years, at which point it would start reducing the deficit rather than growing it. A growing number of Republican governors have expressed support for unconditional cash and economic relief. Most recently, the governor of Massachusetts said, quote, "It would be critical from our point of view for Congress to pass significant relief swiftly to help us beat down the pandemic and, just as importantly, get our economy back on track." End quote. The magnificent host of the Trickle Up, Boyce Littlefield, was a guest on podcast Fun Time Program, where they discussed how awesome Scott Santens is, how he has the perfect answers to every step of the UBI path, and that Scott should become UBI's lobbyist in Washington. I totally agree. His articles are out there to keep informing the general populace. UBI now has popular opinion on its side. The next step is getting Congress on board, and I can't think of a better candidate for it than Scott. He knows politics, he knows UBI, he has connections, he has Yang to help him out, and he's incredibly convincing. We gotta make this happen. I'm happy to announce that we have a new mayor for Guaranteed Income, gang. Welcome Brandon Scott, mayor of Baltimore, to the Basic Income family. Even if he weren't a legend for joining the crew this early in the game, he'd be one for his dope fro. Seriously, it's perfectly trimmed. Make sure you throw him a welcome and a follow. Every major figure to adopt Basic Income should get an instant jump in follower count. That's one of the easiest ways to make it clear that backing UBI is a winning path. Finally, a new UBI organization has developed with the intent to host walk-in outdoor exhibitions for UBI around Europe. On the website, they provide examples in which they depict multiple theme huts, each of which invites visitors to explore a different aspect of the economy related to UBI. Some examples would be indicating what their dream job would be if income were no concern, what a healthy society should prioritize, what's important to a healthy life, etc. They do this by various methods such as dropping balls in slots, wrapping threads around pins on a board, or labeling and raising flags that passersby can see. All of this, of course, to break people out of their thinking about what an economy is and get them to thinking about what an economy should be. Once they are in that mindset, it's very easy to introduce UBI and have it be accepted. The exhibition would be very colorful, attractive, and open, pulling people in and celebrating the positive vision of UBI. It's pretty cool. Now, I'm not sure how much people interact with exhibitions like this, but I'm sure you could do things to draw people in. I'd love to see it in action. Go check it out, and if you want them to visit your city, you can coordinate that through the site as well. Don't forget to throw their Twitter account a follow. And that'll do it for today's Yang Daily. Bookmark and share the Cancia UBI report and the UBI exhibition. Flood Congress with calls, tweets, faxes, and letters using the Resist bot or Income Movement easy contacts below. If you need help, consult Humanity Forward, the Income Movement Aid Database, the Mission Asset Fund, or United Way, and don't forget to Yang Daily.